Welcome, Christian Warriors. Today we're going to talk about a church security team member that used the most minimal force you could ever use to stop somebody at the church that was kind of creating low-level mayhem. The Post Falls Police Department actually sent the report in for the church security team member to get prosecuted. Blows me away too. We'll show the video and everything else, but the worst part though is when he has USCCA for coverage, did have USCCA for coverage, and he was denied. This is the second time for me filming this video. I had to delete the first one because USCCA never got back to me officially. I did talk to a couple of employees, but I couldn't get the information I needed officially from USCCA, and I finally got a hold of somebody that can talk to me at USCCA, and we'll talk about everything they had to say. We'll go over what happened and whether that really makes sense, and we'll let you decide. I'm not here to put USCCA on blast by any stretch of the imagination. I am not trying to get clicks out of their name or anything like that, but I have been telling church security team members to not use USCCA for quite a while. I'm going to talk about my history with all these different companies and looking into who the best is for you. We're also going to talk in depth about the Post Falls Police Department and their refusal to give me the police report and the body cam video, which is really weird. We'll talk about the FOIA request, or the Freedom of Information Act request that I put in. It's odd. That's all I can say, but we'll get in depth into that. And the biggest thing to remember is the guy at the center of this is a decorated Marine, a retired command sergeant major with multiple tours overseas defending our country, and they're prosecuting him. I am a 30-year cop with 20 years on SWAT. I have testified in court as an expert on police practices. So I'm going to give you my opinion about what happened here, and we'll dish everything out. Now, I know some of you are here for the first time because of the title. Welcome. What we do here at Christian Warrior is we talk about church security and everything that has to do with keeping your church safe. Now, our followers are made up mainly of Christians. However, we do have a large segment of Jewish people as well as LDS members as well. You are all welcome here. Even if you're an atheist and a non-believer, you're welcome here. I always give tactical tips, free training. That's the most important part. You can get free training over at christianwarriortraining.com. You can get information on how to detect danger coming into your church, which even if you're not a believer, it's good for you because it helps you determine who's going to hurt you and who's not. We do breakdowns of active shooters, of all sorts of different self-defense issues, and we always put it in a Christian way so that you can walk away with a better understanding of use of force and what the Bible says about force, and so that we can just stay godly people while we try to protect our church. All right, let's break this incident down first. Now, this happened in Post Falls, Idaho. Now, I've been to Post Falls. You guys know that I am now in Idaho. I was a police officer in the San Francisco Bay Area, but when I retired after 30 years, I decided to move back to the United States. Now I live in Idaho, but I'm in southern Idaho. I'm on the bottom end of Idaho. Now, this happened at night, somewhere around 9 o'clock at night. It was dark, and there were children that were participating at the church in a children's ministry. There is bag checks to come in. There are security officers on scene, and there is limited access to protect the children that are at the church that are learning about Christ and worshiping. Now, while all this was going on, a 20-year-old man, not a child, a 20-year-old man on a skateboard wearing a hoodie and a balaclava started speeding through the church grounds on his skateboard. So all you can really see are just his eyes. Now, as he's racing through the church, through the breezeways, it's a very large church with multiple buildings. As he's racing through the church complex, several church workers told him to stop, get off the skateboard, and to come to them. He ignored everybody. He ignored all the employees and volunteers that were telling him to stop as part of the church. When he started coming up to security, they were concerned about the children that were up ahead, and they wanted to stop him to keep him from getting near those children. And he had been told to stop by church staff multiple times. So the security officer stepped in front slightly and reached out and grabbed a hold of the person to make them stop, and he fell to the ground. Okay, it seems like his rapid forward movement, which was the cause of all this anxiety for everybody, caused him, when he came in contact with the security officer, to come to the ground. This is a very minimal amount of force. Now, as the video goes on, it appears that this young man was very heated, very angry, and you can tell that the church security officers were calm, cool, and collected, which is what you would expect from a 30-year Marine Corps veteran, a command sergeant major. You would expect that from him. That young man stormed off, knocking over a sign which showed that his emotions were a little out of control. And then he left the campus, called his sister. His sister returned with him to the campus and called law enforcement. Not him, she did. Law enforcement responded when they came. They interviewed everybody. But the next day, a detective comes to talk to everybody again. Now, this is weird to me. Okay, this is such a minor interaction. I've handled calls like this, multiples of these types of calls. And usually this is handled at the patrol level, meaning the guy that responds to your 911 calls. Usually it's him that shows up and will do the entire investigation. This is really something simple. To be honest, for me, I probably would have just left with a report and that's it, with no further action. Well, sure enough, the detective files that case with the court and they press charges against the Marine Corps veteran. Shocking. Now, the video that I have is the surveillance video, and that's it. There's really no context to it. There's no audio. You can't hear people yelling at this young man to stop. You can't hear the young man's words or the sergeant major's words. And so you're missing some context there. But from what I've seen, I did not see anything that really raised concern to the point of charging crime against this man. So this command sergeant major has USCCA as his self-defense protection. So meaning if I have to use any kind of force on somebody, then I would call them. And they sent him a denial letter saying that they will not cover him. I have the denial letter here. You can also take a look at it over at christianwarriortraining.com. I did a full debrief written on this incident. Well, I can't really call it a full debrief because I'm missing some context from some people, which we'll get into here in a bit. And we'll talk about USCCA and what they had to say here in a moment. But I have everything over there. I have all the forms, the video, the letter from USCCA. I've got it all over there. Why don't you sign up for Christian Warrior Training while you're there, and you'll get my weekly newsletter where I break down crime that occurs at churches throughout the United States for that particular week. There's always multiple crimes of violence, shooting, stabbings, people found dead in a church parking lot, multiple sexual assaults. There's always a lot of activity, and I think we should all be aware of it, so you'll learn about it there. And I also do debriefs like this, active shooter debriefs. I do all of that plus training that you get for free, so it's a good deal for you. Now, I want to go more into this law enforcement response from the Post Falls Police Department. I called the Post Falls Police Department and I ended up getting connected to a lieutenant over there. And the lieutenant told me I should that I didn't have the full story, and that if I wanted a complete picture of that story, I should file a FOIA, or a Freedom of Information Act request, to get the report and the video. Great idea. I would love to see all that. So I did a FOIA request through Post Falls Police Department, or City of Post Falls, and I was immediately rejected. They rejected me immediately, saying that it violated the defendant's due process by giving it to me, which doesn't make sense because I was a cop in the most communist state in America, California. Even we would have released the report. We probably would have released the body cam footage. We would have charged you money for it, which is hilarious that we would charge you for something your tax dollars are paying for, but we would still get it to you. I would gladly have paid for it, but they denied me. So I called the lieutenant again, and I was like, Lieutenant, I really don't want to slam you guys. I would really like to have that information. And he was really good. He's like, hey, let me go find that information for you. He says, hey, it should be taken care of. I get a thing back again, denied again. I send him a message again. I'm like, hey, what's going on? He goes, hey, I'm working on it. And then I get notified that I can have the surveillance video, but not the body camera footage or the police report. Now, those are really important because the surveillance video, it really helps the prosecution of the defendant, this command sergeant major. And I was like, hey, Lieutenant, it looks like you're shaping the narrative against the defendant by not releasing the report and the body camera footage. Why do I want the report? I want to hear the statement made by everybody. I want the body camera footage because it would show you the state of the kid on the skateboard, the sister, the command sergeant major, the security officer. I want to see what his state was. And I want to see the investigation that the cops did. How good was it? Did they do everything that I think they should do? Because I think I am qualified to critique their performance. And if you followed this channel before, I am obviously pro-police, but if they do something bad, I will always call it out. In fact, if you want to look at my Lakewood Church active shooter debrief, you can see how horribly the cops performed and how I outlined how they did and what they did right and what they did wrong over there. But going back to Post Falls, it was odd that they wouldn't release the information that an expert would need to say what really happened. And so to this day, I still don't have the information. Now, I am talking to an attorney that is hopefully going to help me get that information from Post False. But for right now, the information I have comes from firsthand information from somebody that's very aware of this incident and the surveillance footage. That's all I have. But that's what I'm going to go off of, because that's what I have. And if people are unwilling to give me the information I have to look at everything objectively, this is what I've got. So if they want a better opinion, I guess they'll have to release the information like I asked. It's almost like they're hiding something. Are you? Because I don't know, but it seems that way. It seems like by only releasing that video that you're shaping the narrative. And that worries me quite a bit for the defense of the security officer / retired command sergeant major. Let's talk about USCCA. So I have told people to not have USCCA, or if they have USCCA, to switch immediately. Now forget all the stuff you've seen on YouTube. We're going to talk about my experience. I want to love USCCA because they are definitely the biggest stake in the industry. I like how they do training. I like all their media that they put out, the videos, the marketing material. It's all great. The influencers, they're all now leaving them and going to another place we'll talk about in a minute. I want them to succeed because I love the Second Amendment as much as I love the First Amendment, which allows me to come up and speak to you guys without fear of arrest. When I first looked at, I went and looked at the top 11 self-defense protection providers in the United States. There's 11 big ones. And I looked at them all. And the first thing I did was I sent an email to all of them and said, hey, I have a channel, 3 million views a month. I would love to know why I would pick you over somebody else. Specifically, what do you do for church security teams? I heard nothing from USCCA, nothing. And here's the thing, if I have 3 million views and they're not willing to return my call, then what's gonna happen to you when you need help? Or you have a question, are you gonna get information back? And when I started looking at all the different stuff, I'll give you an example. There was a forum on USCCA's website where somebody asked the question, will you cover me if I'm church security? And the response from an employee was, I don't know, it depends. It depends? Man, I tell you what, if it depends, I don't want you, right? And so that left a bad taste in my mouth, especially like I couldn't get anybody to clarify because I'm going off one of their forums, but yet they didn't return my email. Okay, so that's why I didn't pick them. Who I ended up picking was another group, which we can talk about later, but I just want to be clear. I am not under contract from anybody. I am not under a contract with a self-defense protection provider at all. If I was to come under contract with one of them, I could easily clear $30,000 a year just for promoting them. I purposefully don't do that because I want to have a clear conscience to tell you who is the best for church security. So I hope you understand that as we talk more about this. Now, USCCA I called down there and said, hey, I'm going to do this article in this video on this self-defense issue and Post False. I would really like to have an official statement from you guys. And when I called the main number, they're like, yep, we'll get this to somebody that will get a hold of you. Nothing, man. I heard crickets for weeks. Nothing. Well, I get it. I get that they don't want to do an official statement because, it leaves them in a bad spot. Okay, but honestly, USCCA, I know you're watching this. You really need to do better damage control because you're not good at damage control. I think you've been unjustly criticized for some stuff. There was there was at least one shooting that I know of that you didn't cover the person, and I agree with your decision. But with that said, I went and taught a class in New Orleans. And in that class, I told everybody, if you have USCCA, you should probably get rid of it and go somewhere else. This is why. And I brought up all the stuff I just talked about. Plus, I brought up this issue in Post False where they weren't protecting this command sergeant major, now security officer. Sure enough, if I ever talk bad about one of these companies, I can guarantee you I'll get a phone call in 24 hours. And sure enough, I got a phone call 24 hours later from an area rep who said, I may have it wrong about USCCA, and he wanted to talk to me and put me on the right track, right? And I said, okay, and we were messaging back and forth. And I'm like, that's awesome, but let me know what's going on with Post False. I've been waiting for somebody to talk to me about that. And to his credit, he said, yeah, I'm looking into it. And when we talked on the phone, we talked later that day, he goes, I can't talk about that specifically, but it looks like we might have messed up. I can see where the person took your call. This goes back to like when I first called to evaluate everybody. It says, nobody called you back and that's our fault. Yes, it is your fault. Nobody called me. He said he couldn't comment on this Post Falls incident, but he would get a hold of somebody that would. Another week goes by and I haven't heard from anybody. And it's like, well, okay, I'm gonna shoot this video. And in that video, USCCA, just so you know, I slammed you hard, worse than what you're feeling right now. But I got a call back from USCCA, which is causing me to redo this entire video so I can talk about their response. Their response, I get where they're coming from. I really do. What they say is, he did not say, no, this part I don't agree with. Because the defendant, the command sergeant major / security officer did not come out and say, I need help because I use self-defense for fear of my life. Here's where I have a problem with. If he was actually on the phone with an attorney and not a claims adjuster, or whatever you would call it, then that person would realize, well, you didn't fear for your life, you feared for the lives of the children that were there and the church staff. You were worried that if this person continued, that something would happen to those kids or the church staff, so you stopped him because he was ignoring commands to stop by everybody else. So you were acting in defense of others. So my question was, does your contract allow for defense of others, not just defense of self? And they said yes. Then why aren't we protecting him? Then why aren't you? And he says, well, we're looking into it. The insurance company has it, and we are re-looking into it, which here's the part about re-looking into it. They're looking at it again, so they denied him. Now they say that when you deny somebody, it automatically triggers a review. But it's funny that this happened back in December. We're now in February, so a couple months later, and they're only doing a review when some YouTuber calls and says, hey, what's going on with this case? Now I'm not saying, I know USCCA is like, that's not the way it happened. I get it. That may not be the way it happened, but that's the way it looks, and perception is reality, right? Look, I was a cop in the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, my jury pool was Oakland and Berkeley, to give you an idea. I know that perception is reality. So what people are perceiving as happening is what is really happening, whether you like it or not. So USCCA, man, you need to cover this guy. But it's too late. He already hired his own guy. He's already hired an attorney. And thankfully, the church is backing him and the church is covering it. So we've got some stuff to talk about at the end where we're going to talk more about what you can do as a church and a church security officer to protect yourself. That's coming up. But I got to say to USCCA, my personal opinion is you should have covered him right off the bat. He was acting in defense of others. You have to look at the optics of what's going on. You have been denying, like you've been getting hammered, whether it's true or not. You're getting hammered on YouTube constantly, and your influencers that support you are jumping ship. Now let's talk about the influencers that are jumping ship. I'm not speaking for them. I have not talked to any of them, but I can tell you there is one group that they're going to from USCCA, because USCCA is kind of becoming a toxic brand for them. They can't keep supporting them because they're getting so much heat over this perceived lack of support for people in self-defense shootings, whether it's right or not. And so it becomes toxic. You have to leave it as an influencer because they're protecting their brand. So they're going somewhere else. Now, the one place they're going to, when I reviewed all these 11 different companies, there was one during a live stream that I did over at Christian Warrior Training for my group of people that subscribe. I do a members only live stream once a month to talk about issues like this. And in that, I talked about this other company. Now, I'm not going to name them. You guys can probably figure it out, but I have learned stop talking smack about companies because attorneys don't like it when you talk bad about them. And I'm sure somebody's waiting to sue me for something. They told me I had it wrong on what I was saying and why I wasn't going to recommend them. And they started to school me on self-defense shootings. It's a 30-year cop. I think I understand self-defense shootings, okay? When we were done, it was very obvious that they were telling me the same thing that I said, but in a different way to make it sound good, but it wasn't in my eyes. And they left it with, well, let me give you some advertising revenue. We have a budget for that now. So paying that large sum for me to now say they're a great company. Now look, at the end of that review that I did of all 11 companies, you can read the article that I did over here at ChristianWarriorTraining.com. And I chose Right to Bear. I chose Right to Bear. The communication I had with them was just like, hey, tell me about this, tell me about that. But in the end, I chose them because they were the best for church security. Not for concealed carriers, not for you working security on a paid job in uniform, none of that. Just you're working for your church. And they were the best. I'm not under contract by Right to Bear. Right to Bear didn't know I was going to make that announcement. And when I did, the president of the company called me the next day to say thank you. I told him I didn't want to be under contract because every year I'm going to redo this and pick who's the best. I'm hoping one year USCCA is the best. I hope that they turn it around. I really want them to be a lot better than what they are. But I chose Right to Bear, and I feel good about that decision the more I talk to them. Now, do I make money from Right to Bear? Yeah, if you sign up using the link I provide, then I get $30. If you don't use my link, which I don't care, use the link or not. It doesn't bother me. If you don't use the link, and you just go Right to Bear, no problem. Now, I did work with Right to Bear so that if you signed up using my code, Warrior2, then you would get free 50 state, and you would get civil coverage and like some others, and a reduction and it would cost like $180 a year. That's it. They're not sponsoring this video. They might be mad that I'm slamming one company and then talking about them. But I just want to be transparent, because some people think that I'm under contract for Right to Bear. I'm not. I'm free to tell the truth about every company as I see what's going on, and not worried about getting hammered, okay? All right, let's talk about some of the lessons learned, okay? Number one, you want to ensure that any crime that's committed at your church is documented. Post Falls isn't a huge agency. You can call them. They're very customer service oriented, and they will come over and write a report because your next door neighbor's dog was barking, right? Here we got a kid that's trespassing. The crime is trespassing, okay? Now there may have been, I heard, and I can't confirm, but I heard that the Post Falls police said that they can't do trespassing because there's no trespassing signs at the church. That's fine, you don't need no trespassing signs. When you have multiple employees telling you to stop, dismount, get off the skateboard to come to them, and you ignore, you're now a trespasser. Your warning for trespassing was them telling you to stop. So is it something you would get a conviction out of? No, of course not. But you're also not going to get a conviction for what happened here. This is Idaho. We're not talking about the Boise area, which is very liberal. We're talking about Post Falls, Idaho, and Kootenai County. This is a red county and a red state. Not just like a red county. I mean, it's like bright, bright red. I don't think there is anybody in Kootenai County that's going to convict a command sergeant major for what you see on this video, because he didn't do anything wrong from what we see. And it sure would be nice that if the people that think he was wrong to release the body camera footage and the police report so we can look for ourselves. But we don't have that. So look, you're not going to get a conviction. But look, you used force on somebody. You touched them, they fell to the ground, and you need to call law enforcement, have them come take a report. It's important for you as a church security officer to understand crimes that could be committed at your church. Trespassing, disturbing a church service while it's going, which would include these kids at night, that would be it as well, right? So you can get them for disturbing a church service that's in session. You've got, assault with a deadly weapon, murder, domestic violence, kidnapping, all the crimes that could occur at a church. Go look at my crime bulletin that I put out each week. And I talk about burglaries, rapes, trespassing, threats that are made, all this stuff you should look at and go, what's the code in my state for that? And read it. So when you call law enforcement, sometimes law enforcement will try to walk away without doing anything, whether that's right or wrong. If you feel an arrest should be made, then you tell them, I would like to do a citizen's arrest. I encourage citizen's arrests all the time when I was a cop on the street. If it was because cops aren't able to make arrests for certain crimes like trespass. They can't make an arrest for trespass if it wasn't committed in their presence. So they're going to need you to make that arrest. And it's really simple. As a cop, I did a citizen's arrest just a couple months ago for a vicious dog that was in my neighborhood. And I called, animal control came out and I'm like, hey, the violation is loose dog and vicious dog. Here are the sections. I'd like to issue the citation, which is a misdemeanor. They're kind of getting cite released on it. And she's like, oh, okay. Are you prior law enforcement? Well, it doesn't matter, but yes. And so I signed the citation. You can do the same thing. Just know your rights. Now, look, if you want to arrest them for a crime that you think was committed, but there is no crime because the expert is telling you that there's nothing, then they're going to tell you that and no arrest is going to be made. Okay, but if there was a crime, you certainly can't make a citizen's arrest. My recommendation, I always told my cops, if you use force on somebody, anybody, then that means a crime was committed. And I want you to make an arrest for that. Don't let anybody go. Their warning was them getting thrown to the ground, right? And you're going to arrest them and send them away, because if you don't, stuff like this happens, right? People come back, they say you were wrong. They can't say you were wrong if they're sitting in jail, right? So everybody's got to go to jail if you use force on them. It always makes you look better if you use force and they were booked. You want to understand your self-defense provider. You want to read the member agreement. Nobody reads the member agreement. It's like reading the user agreement for some software that you bought. Everybody just clicks yes and moves on. When I looked at all 11 providers, I looked at their policy, their member statement, and what they are going to cover and not cover. Some of you would be appalled. There's one that I looked at. They convened a board, and the board decided if they were going to cover you or not. No, I don't want that. And so I read the member agreement for Right to Bear. Is it perfect? No, they've got some work to do. But so does every other provider that's out there. I read the member agreement. There are several that I read that were actually okay. There were a lot of them that absolutely scared me. You yourself need to read the member agreement. So if you have USCCA, read the member agreement and think if you look at it and decide if you're good with that, if you agree with what they're going to cover or not cover. So understand your self-defense provider and what they're going to do for you. Not what the salesperson says they're going to do for you, but what the actual statement says. You want to work with your church leadership. Are they going to cover you if something bad happens? Now, this church is backing the security officer all the way. They're even paying for his self-defense through his defense attorney right now. I love it. That was great. But you need to have that conversation with your church right now. What are you going to cover and not cover? And how much are you going to back me? You really need to know, right? The other thing I want you to do is I want you to review all laws within your state that are applicable to your church. We talked about that already, but I'll give you an interesting one. In Idaho, we have House Bill 511 that gives immunity to church security personnel that use force in civil cases. Now, I talked to the person that wrote that bill, the attorney, and he told me that they didn't include prosecution, meaning immunity from prosecution, because, quote, this is Idaho. I didn't think we needed to do that. I agree with you. I didn't think we needed that either. But here's the thing. In Idaho, if this kid gets mad and wants to sue the church, he can't. He can't because he has immunity and the church has immunity from being sued under House Bill 511. Wonderful, right? Now, to the prosecutors that I know are going to watch this, the Post Falls prosecutors are going to watch this all the way to the end. Thank you for making it this far, guys. I appreciate it. Besides, you're really getting paid for this anyways, or the DA investigator, one of you guys. I wonder why you made the charge, because even though House Bill 511 doesn't apply for criminal acts, it's there that shows that the state believes that church security people should have some leeway when it comes to force and protecting the church. You people are ignoring the spirit of what the state wants. And that is sad. And inevitably, I know media outlets from Idaho are going to watch this. Thank you for watching. I hope that you contact all of our state leadership, and we need to get on House Bill 511 that gives immunity from civil cases. You need to tack on criminal cases, apparently, because we have rogue prosecutors that are just going crazy doing stupid stuff like this. All right, 2 things I want you to do when you leave here. I want you to pray unceasingly for the safety of our churches, our safety team personnel. Pray for this security officer, retired Command Sergeant Major. He's given so much to this country and he's given so much to the Lord. Let's all pray for him that this all gets dismissed and he can get on with his life. And let's pray that USCCA does what they're supposed to do and cover this man and stop this, whatever it is that they're doing. Last thing I want you to remember is your ABCs. Always be caring.